Good morning, students. Please be seated and we're going to get started. But first, we've got a quick announcement for those of you who are new to our Future 101 lectures. Welcome and hit that subscribe button if you would like to be marked present on our attendance list for today. And for the rest of our viewers, you know what to do. Hit that like button and we're going to get started. My name is Andriy, and I am blessed with the presence of my favorite co-host, Miss
Aw,
Bethany Brown.
thanks. So sweet.
I nailed that one.
Yeah, you did.
Well, for those of you who know history, Dwight Eisenhower, who was a World War II officer, who was also a U.S. president.
Oh, nice.
Yes. He states that politics should be the part-time profession of every citizen. So me and Bethany today, or Miss Brown, I should get used to Miss Brown. But me and Miss Brown today are going to do our citizens' duty and study our politics and analyze what happened in the last few days, because we've had a crazy election
We just had an election, yeah.
in our province of Ontario where Doug Ford, the Progressive Conservatives, win a massive majority as NDPs, and the Liberal leaders resign.
They did. That was interesting. I like that quote. I think it's true. Politics should be the part-time profession of every citizen. Too many of us run from it. You know, we got to get involved if we actually want to make a difference and fix things. And we'll get to this a bit later, but people do not want to be involved these days. It's really unfortunate.
Well, we're going to actually see how many people participate
Hmm.
and do their citizens' duty of having politics as a part-time
Yes,
profession.
your civic duty of voting.
The civic duty. I mean, we have a civics class
We
at school.
did, yeah. Grade 10, what is it? Yeah, grade 10 civics. That's what it is, where
Yeah.
you learn all about the political system. And then a couple of years later, you actually get to vote and forget about all of it. So maybe this will be a refresher for some of you.
Yeah. It's only covered in grade 9 for our Ontario curriculum, and
Grade 10. Yeah.
grade 9 and 10.
No,
Or is it in grade
it's just
10?
grade 10.
Okay,
It's
well,
just grade
in
10. Yeah.
grade 10.
Just a half
I thought it
credit.
was a grade 9. Maybe
No.
I'm just old. Anyways, well, the first crazy news about the election that occurred was that, the opposition leaders decided to resign. Del
Yeah.
Duca not winning his riding. You
No, he
did a
didn't
little
even
bit
get
of
in.
digging into that. You want to go into it in more detail?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he was kind of a hot topic leading up to the election.
Hmm.
I was interested. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Here's the leader of the Liberal Party, and there's a chance that he might not even win in his riding. And that's always an interesting thing, to speculate about a bit. Like, what if the Liberals actually got minority or majority government and their leader did not get elected? I honestly kind of wanted him to get in just to
Just to
see
see what
what would
happens.
happen. Or not him to get in, but for the Liberals to win
Yeah.
so we could watch this play out. I just thought that would be funny. But anyways, that did not happen because the Liberals actually did not even get enough seats to regain party status. They only got 8 seats, which I mean,
What
hey,
are they
that's
called? The
that's one
minivan
better.
party?
Yeah, it's one better. They have been graduated from minivan party status. They just had 7 seats in the last
Yeah.
election,
They
and
added
now they've
another
got
child.
one more. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I gotta
Fucking
step up
pathetic.
from the step up from the minivan. Yeah, so they're still 4 seats short of actually having a official party status. You need to have 12. So they did not get that. There's this interesting little segment from an article. The Liberals are currently only elected or leading in 8 ridings, so they're short,
Hmm.
4 short of the official party status. Um, and then Del Duca announced, I have no doubt that the women and men that Ontario Liberals have elected to the legislature will do their part to help grow a new and energetic progressive movement here in Ontario. It will, however, be a movement that will be led by a new leader. So he's stepping down. He did not get voted in, and he is no longer going to be the leader of the Liberal Party in Ontario, even though he had previously indicated he would stay on as Liberal leader even if he loses his riding.
How does that work?
Honestly, I have no idea. I'm not actually, I don't know.
I mean, like even for just the liberals who would be like supposedly they would be in parliament and or they would be in power. How could they, follow a leader who did not win his own riding and is not successful as a politician himself?
That's pretty bad. That guy's your leader, and he was not even successful in his own territory. Yeah, that's not
That's
great
an interesting
leadership.
one. So the liberals are just in complete disarray. This
Yeah.
election was completely insane for them.
Mm-hmm.
But the NDPs are no better. They did a little bit
Yes.
better, of course.
They
I
did. They
mean,
got more seats,
yes,
but if you look at the actual percentage, ridings aside, um, I think the Liberals actually did a little bit better in terms of, I think that's the popular vote, but percentage wise, they
hmm.
actually got a few more votes than the NDP did. But with how our voting system works, the NDP got more seats.
Okay. Looking at the official statistics here from Elections Ontario, the Progressive Conservatives Party got 1,892,000 votes,
Hmm.
where the NDP got 1,098,000 votes, and the Liberal Party got 1,100,000 votes.
Yeah, they did. So they got
So,
more votes,
yeah,
yet the NDP got more seats in Parliament.
significantly more seats. This is
Way
so
more,
the
like
Liberal
triple.
Party got 8 seats, whereas the NDP got 31, and PCs just nailed it with 83.
Yeah,
Dougie
they
got it
got
done.
more seats. They did. He did.
They did indeed.
Yeah, they actually ended up with more seats than they had before the election, which
So
was
it's
interesting.
interesting how our political system works because just the fact that the liberals got more number of votes, but they got significantly less number of seats than the NDP, it's just interesting to me how that plays out.
Yep, that's our first past the
It's
post.
representative democracy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yes, that's what we have.
So, for our viewers today, we are brand new to politics and we are young voters ourselves.
Yes, we are.
So we are learning all the terminology. We're getting involved in the politics because it is part of our citizens' duty, and that's what we encourage others to do as well. It's quite fascinating to see this. It's kind of like a drama show.
It is. It really was very interesting. So honestly, the low voter turnout was kind of shocking, but we'll get to that in a
Yes.
minute. So Andrea Horvat is also stepping down, and she's in a different position from Del Duca because she actually did get elected in her riding,
Hmm.
and yet, and that would place her as the official opposition once again. But she is resigning from that position, so she's still going to be an MPP in Parliament, but she is no longer going to be leading the NDP party, which means that we have two leadership races coming up in the near future for the Liberals and the NDPs for Ontario. So,
So there
man,
is
it's an
no.
election full year.
So we have a majority government, and
Yes,
we
we do.
have no opposition leader.
No, we don't.
That sounds like a fucking disaster.
Yeah.
We're gonna get into this as well, and I want to jump into that right away. Just talking about majority governments, and we've
Mm-hmm.
had two majority governments in a row by the progressive conservatives, and just talking about after doing a little bit of research, talking about majority governments and the minority governments and why it is not ideal for a democratic government to have a majority government. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
typically, obviously, it's going to depend on your political beliefs and your political philosophy, but the fact is that when you have a majority government, the government practically has the say for anything they want to push forward. So if they want to push a new bill, they have the authority to do that without the opposition, because the opposition might say no, but it doesn't matter. It still gets passed because you have the majority. And why is that a bad thing? Well, for a democratic government, that is not ideal, only because you want the government to form debate. You want the government to
Mm-hmm.
go into rationalizations as to, opposition wants this and the government is proposing this, and they can never come to agreement. And that's
Yes.
a good thing for government because we don't want the government solving the problems. We want the government to prevent problems from happening. And problems
Yes.
only occur when the government has so much power, and if you accumulated so much power that it's just they're able to push new laws without having any sort of backlash from the opposition.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, it would be really nice to actually hear some legitimate debate, and I think like more discussion because like I joined a debate club for a couple months 2 years ago, and I had to leave because all the members ever did was yell at each other. I'm right, I'm right. It's just it's really irritating. And then if you watch any like clips from our parliaments, either federally or provincially, it's exactly the same thing. It's just, a member of the opposition says something, and then a member of the government does not actually answer the questions. It's like you're talking at each other and not over each other, because you've got the Speaker of the House, so there is some order to it, but very minimal, I would say. In my opinion, honestly, I think it's so unprofessional in so many cases. But there's no discussion happening. It's not real debate. They ignore the questions, and like some politicians come in and like they have amazing questions that really
Mhm.
get at what the issue is. And it's like, I actually want to hear what your response is to this question. But it's like, someone will ask the finance minister, like, okay, how's our budget doing, or whatever, ask like for a specific number, but one thing that they should have with them right there on their notes, and they just evade the question
Yeah.
entirely, do not answer it, or spin it back, and it's just like trash talking the person who asked the question. It's so unprofessional, and I don't know how anything gets done.
It sounds like an old couple bickering at each other.
Man, that's how our government works.
But you see, that is something that is good when they kind of go back and forth in a debate where they're talking about a new bill or a new thing proposed.
Hmm.
That's what's normal, because then nothing gets done over the 4 years. And I mean, it's not, I mean, of course you want things to progress to a good level, but you want a good level of debate before it does get passed on.
Yeah, exactly. You want to make sure that you've worked at all the potential
Hmm.
problems, and that you're actually seeing that this thing that you want to implement is going to make a good difference.
Yes, but the unfortunate reality with with our freedom movement is what we've seen during the election, and the voter turnout was low. That's one problem. But another huge issue is that a lot of people in the freedom movement that want less restrictions, they don't want lockdowns. They were the ones who voted for the PCs, and they are happy about a majority government because they just really did not want a liberal minority or an
Hmm.
NDP minority. But that is a problem, because if we've had a liberal minority, well, we would very likely get that debate that we want. We would get those
Yeah, the minority
rationalizations.
government allows for it more because you have more people in parliament who are not the
Hmm.
governing party.
Yes.
So it takes more time for everything to happen. I mean, if you look federally, Trudeau has still managed to get by with a lot. So does it really work? Does it really make a difference?
Well,
Maybe
but
in
it
theory.
does make a difference, because that's how a lot of voters think, is that, oh, it doesn't matter, all these, it's either going to be PC or it's going to be liberal or NDP, and all of them are
Hmm.
bad. So
Hmm.
I'm just going to vote for the lesser evil, so to speak. But I wouldn't agree with that, because like, you have so much more power, and you could see this with the statistics. I mean, looking at the voter turnout, right?
It
Looking
was
at this
really
beautiful pie chart,
bad. Oh man.
amazing pie chart. So the we
Hold on.
actually
Before we get to the pie chart, can we look at this line graph?
Oh, this is great.
That is beautiful. It just plummets. It absolutely plummets. So voter turnout was 43% this election, which is literally the worst that it has been in, how far back does this
Ever.
graph go?
This is the
Oh,
lowest.
1867. That's like basically the start of Canada. So, yeah, this is the worst voter
18
turnout
well,
ever.
1867 was when Canada 1867 is when Canada was created.
There you go.
So
That's the year.
ever.
Yes, ever. This is the worst.
All right.
It's the worst voter turnout ever.
Anyways, so 43% voter turnout was the lowest yet for an Ontario election. Um,
That's terrible. That's less than half the population showed up to vote. Did you vote, Andre?
of course I did.
Okay, good.
I'm
I did too.
I'm a great citizen.
Awesome. Give you a gold star. Oh man.
So 57% of eligible voters did not vote. They did not cast a ballot.
Yeah.
And from the 43% who voted, 18% voted for the Conservatives, 10% voted for the Liberals and the NDP, another 10%, and other, which would include New Blue and the Ontario Party, and
Hmm.
independents.
And the other wide array
The other,
of parties that
yeah,
we have in
the
Ontario.
communists and all the other ones, 5%. So looking at this, only about 18% of the population that was eligible to vote were the deciding factor in this election, and they
And
gained
they gave us a
a
majority
majority.
government.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a whole lot more people in Ontario who did not vote for Ford than who did.
So now looking at the point of like, oh, it doesn't matter who I vote for, so I'm just not going to vote because they're all the same. Well, this clearly shows that people have so much power.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically the ones who decided not to vote, and specifically like the freedom movement, who was so frustrated with Ford's government and the way they handled the pandemic.
Yeah.
We decided to vote for the same fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
does not,
So
it baffles me. These results were really surprising and shocking to see, because we thought, okay, well, we have New Blue, we have Ontario Party. We thought, people were going to vote for those and they're going to get out and actually express their opinions with their vote.
mm-hmm.
But that didn't happen, because a lot of them thought, oh, Ontario Party's not going to win. The New Blue is not going to win. So I'm just going to vote PC to make sure that the Libs are not going to get power.
But if you think like that, then nothing is going to change. Yeah, honestly, okay, what about this as a voting strategy? Because everybody always votes for the party that is like the opposite of the one they don't want to get in.
Mm-hmm.
It's really convoluted. But they never vote for the one they want. Okay, and I really think that you should vote for the candidate that you most agree with. Regardless of party, chances are that, like in my case, like the person that I voted for, I agree most with their party's platform. So
Mm-hmm.
that just happened to be the situation, and that's probably fairly common. But vote for the person for the candidate that actually best represents your beliefs and what you want to see happening. Don't do this like voting for the lesser evil. It's a terrible idea because you're still ending up with the evil.
Yeah,
That's what you're voting for.
You're accepting that.
Yes. Okay, but how's this for a voter strategy? Okay, because like when I went to vote, there were like a ton of candidates, and I think we had like all of them. We had the Conservatives, Liberals, NDP,
In your
Green,
writing.
Ontario Party, and New Blue in my party,
Okay.
in my riding. But then on the ballot there was also like an independent. There was another one, the median or something. I don't know, something started with an N. Some other small party that I hadn't even heard of before.
Yeah.
And I think there were another like one or two. There were a ton of people on the list. So honestly, if you don't want one of the like main parties to get in, just show up and vote for the one you've never heard of. I would love to see what happens if people voted like that.
Right. So do we vote for the one we never heard of, or do we vote for our local candidate that we agree with?
Well, I think you should vote for the one that you agree with. But if you really don't care, because like I went out, I actually did some campaigning this year, and like I was like knocking on doors, and I came to this one guy, and he's like, I don't vote, and I'm
Mhm.
like, well, okay, I guess. But like if you, I mean, the other thing is too, like you can go and you can spoil your ballot if you want. So like just go, do something.
Yeah.
You have the right, you have the duty. You really should. You should go and vote.
Yes. Well, it is a citizen's duty. That's what we're taught in schools.
Yeah.
Of course, most people don't take it to heart, and they just think, oh, whatever. I mean, I was talking to my buddy, and he just came back from BC, but he actually came back on time to vote. And he was just like, I told him about the election, and he's like, oh yeah, there was an election, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the response you get from young people,
Yeah.
is that they have no idea. They don't pay attention to this stuff. They don't care, because they feel like we put so much trust in our government that it doesn't even matter who we vote for, they'll take care of us. That's kind of the assumption of the average person.
I do not believe that.
Well, of course we don't believe that, and most people who are watching this who do not. But the average individual just doesn't give a fuck. I mean, it's pretty evident with 57%
Yeah, it's
voter,
really obvious
not
here.
voting.
This is terrible.
Yeah, so something's got to change. I mean, if you want change, you first got to believe that change is possible, and then act on it.
Mm-hmm.
And change is really possible in the political system. That's not something that I encouraged in the past, in terms of like, oh, we got to hope in the political system. The reality is we likely don't, but at the same time, you cannot give up on it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to participate. You have to go
You
out
need
to
to
vote.
be involved.
And especially with all these other people not participating, you have a huge voice. Just the freedom movement itself, we had around 30% of people do not agree with vaccination mandates in Canada. So 30%
Is
decided
more
to
than
vote.
18%.
More
that
than
voted
18%.
in the majority.
You you would get a crazy majority for us.
Yes.
Right? If we were not so divided and we actually just voted for a local party candidate that we agreed with.
Hmm.
That's all you got to do. It's very simple, and they make elections very simple these days. You just, you get a card in the mail. You don't have to go sign up anywhere online. You just
Hmm.
go to the place, and
It
you
takes like five
it takes
minutes.
5 minutes. And especially with now like these electronic voting machines and everything, it's quick.
Yes. Do we
And
trust those? We don't know.
we don't. That's a
That's
topic
up
for
for
another
debate.
day. But with how easy they make voting these days, it's really no excuse. And you should not be watching the polls that are coming out, prior to the election. Oh, they're gonna get a majority, and there's no
Hmm.
chance of any
Hmm.
other party winning. That's BS. It's
Yeah.
complete. It's bogus.
I mean, to be fair, this time the projections were like almost spot on. I think they did kind of hint towards the Liberals actually regaining party status and being the official opposition rather than the NDP. But the prediction was that we would have a majority with the Conservatives. So they were right. But again, it's like,
We made them right.
exactly, because if you're
You
paying
believed
attention to
it.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
why.
That
That's why
is
they were
why this
right.
is what happened. Yes.
So, I mean, the people who are on our side of political spectrum that believe in the freedom of choice, they don't typically watch TV anymore. They don't follow these things. I mean, they always say, I mean, and we always talk about this too, is that mainstream media is not a reliable source of information.
Yep.
Yet, we're going to believe that their polls are true and compatible, and their
Yeah.
projections are actually
Who
going to be
is really
true.
filling out these polls? I don't
Well,
know.
I'm my assumption is that they're done based on like these analytics that they have.
Oh, probably.
I really wonder how it's done. Um,
Because I mean, when I hear polls, I'm thinking, well, first of all, I had no idea what they meant like a couple of years ago.
mhm.
But like this year, I've seen a lot of like in freedom group chat kind of things. People would always share those little like if you go to any news website, they're always polling about something. And so it's like one of the big things was, do you think that Quebec should be implementing the tax on the unvaccinated people? And then people would like share this poll question around, and we would totally, the numbers are totally faked because everyone is doing this intentionally and voting no, this should not happen, and you can vote multiple times on those things too. So
Oh, I remember that. It was
yeah.
going around in all the Telegram chats.
Yes.
Vote, 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 vote.
So I mean, if that's what's happening with these polls, it's completely faked.
Yes. Well, I cannot find direct information on how the data is actually collected. But yeah, but at the end of the day, I just don't think you should rely on that. I mean, election day is election day, and that's when most of the votes will be casted.
Yep.
And that's the bottom line.
Hmm.
That's all you need. You know
Yes.
that on election day, everything could change. I mean, we saw this with the American election. You're going to bed and you're feeling like, oh, Donald Trump's going to take it again. And then you wake up and it's fucking insane. Like, what happened? It's just complete
Yeah.
180, right? And that's what's but the Americans have that gumption. They have that mistrust with the government. They have that
Hmm.
mistrust um with their mainstream media, especially the ones on
Canadians
the
are too
right.
nice. We trust
But
our government.
we just leave it up to the government, do whatever you want with us. And a lot of people complained about how Ford has handled the pandemic.
Hmm.
So many complaints came in during that time, but it seems like, it's summer now, everything's open, you can go to your favorite restaurant, you can go to your basic job, and therefore people forget. Like, people settle really quickly, and it allows the government to run an election in the summer when everybody's smiling, and it's
Hmm.
like, oh, we made it through this tough time,
Man, everyone has such short-term memories these
and
days. It's like, did
people
you
don't
forget what
remember.
happened like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Did you forget what happened 6 months ago?
And another misconception about the freedom movement is that, like, people, we've had people contact us directly on Instagram.
Yes, yes, we got a message. I think it was earlier today, and this student goes, "Aren't the conservatives, despite all their flaws, the only party that stands against vaccine mandates? What result were you hoping for?" Because we posted a reel about the election results and how we're not thrilled by a
Fucking
conservative
majority.
majority, and no. Can we please just take a moment to recognize that the Ford government, the conservatives, are the ones who've been in power for the past 4 years, which includes the past 2 years, at which time lockdowns were implemented by our provincial government. The
Yet somebody
Conservative
believes
Party,
that they're against the lockdowns.
yes, yes.
Logic.
No, the conservatives are the ones who implemented the lockdowns. They are not against the lockdowns. I mean, Ford has said some confusing stuff like over the past couple of years. He contradicts himself a lot, says we won't be doing this and then he does do that. So I can see why there could be some confusion, but the fact is we've had lockdowns. So the conservatives are not against lockdowns. Just to clear that up.
Yeah, well, I mean, just looking at their platform that they used, of course, to win the election, to gain the crazy majority, even a bigger majority than last time. So let's take a look at what they promised and proposed to the people of Ontario.
Yes, they have 5 points. That's all I could find on their website. Just 5 things.
Just the five.
That's what they went
They're
on.
keeping it simple.
Yes. So number one is to rebuild Ontario's economy, bring back good manufacturing jobs to the province, and unlock the economic potential of the Ring of Fire and Northern Minerals by connecting them to the future of electric vehicles and the batteries that power them.
Amazing.
More electric vehicles in our future. That's what that is. Number two, to build highways and key infrastructure, including Highway 413 and the Bradford Bypass. We will keep expanding public transit and bring GO train service to Bowmanville and London. I mean, I like the GO train, but that's going to be even more construction.
Yeah, and I believe that the NDP were not actually focused on the building of infrastructure and things like that during the campaign, and so I heard this from Mohammed's writing, was that the NDP did not focus on that and they actually lost their seat to a conservative. But that's something that would need to be fact checked. But I don't think they had the highway construction as under their platform.
Okay, so from the NDP's 5 highlights for their platform, bring back real rent control, end exclusionary zoning. That's another housing thing. Deliver publicly funded mental health, and make the TTC more frequent and reliable. So there is some transit there. And then fix education.
Okay, so nothing about the highway building.
Nothing about the highway, not
Yeah.
in their
But
not in their
because
key 5 points.
Mohammed's writing is in Brampton, I believe they're looking to build a highway in the area. And so when the NDPs did not really focus on that, that's really hurt them. But anyways, moving on to the next
Point
piece.
number 3. Yes, please remember all of these. We'll check back in 4 years and see if they actually kept their word.
Yeah.
I mean, politicians like Del Duca couldn't even keep their word for a couple of weeks of remaining the leader of the party, even if they didn't get their seats. So I don't know that we have too much hope that the Conservatives will actually follow through on this. But anyways, number 3. We will never stop working for workers by getting more people into the skilled trades. We'll invest in training and make it easier for newcomers to start careers, and expand 3-year college degrees and increase the minimum wage.
Wow.
Okay, so what happens when we increase the minimum wage is small businesses cannot afford to pay their employees because they're not just making more money. The bigger companies, they can afford to do that, but the smaller businesses cannot. So this is another thing that is going to hurt small businesses if the minimum wage does increase. And going back to the whole debate in Parliament thing, so already the Conservatives have a majority government, so the chances of them being able to implement yet another minimum wage, because they have increased minimum wage, I think 3 times in the past 4 years. So I totally see that happening. I think they will follow through on that. But the official opposition, the NDP, also wants to increase minimum wage. So there's going to be no debate about that. It's going to be, we are increasing the minimum wage. So that's just great. They actually want to increase it. I think minimum wage is $15 an hour right now. And the NDP wants it up to either $20 or $22 an hour over the next 4 years. So I have a feeling the Conservatives just might go right along with that.
But Miss Brown, students are going to have questions. And the question is, what's so bad about increasing minimum wage if, inflation's going up and the prices are going up? I want to make more money on my hourly rate.
I know that you do. I know that you do. Let's see. I have a nice little, well, there was a study that was done um, by the World Bank Group. And I like this line. The majority of the empirical evidence suggests that the effects of minimum wage increases on unemployment and the demand for labor are unclear. So their study couldn't show too much,
Great
which
study.
it's another one of those where they just the information is inconclusive. Um, but in countries with high levels of informal employment, minimum wage increases can increase informal employment since the formal workers who lose their jobs are absorbed by the informal sector of the economy. So we increase minimum wage, people can't, like the employers can't then afford to pay their employees, which means they have to cut back on their employees, which means people lose their jobs, and then they end up working outside of these jobs where you're actually given a secure income. And so you get people doing contract work for less than minimum wage.
Mhm.
So chances are, if the province just increases minimum wage for everybody, then it's going to make it harder for you to get a job. And then you might actually end up making less money.
Because you won't have a job.
Well, yes, but then if you do find like some informal work to do or like a side thing, freelancing, contract work,
Then you're
whatever it is,
naturally going to make less money, yeah.
yes.
Potentially.
Unless you're really, really skilled and you can
Yeah.
charge a lot more. But I mean, this is just like
We're talking
that's
about
what's going to
minimum
happen.
wage
We're
work
talking,
here.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
well, just going back to the businesses, we did actually take a look. We spoke to business
We've
owners,
been talking to
plenty of
lots
business
of business
owners.
owners lately.
We talked to them in the lakeshore area
Hmm.
predominantly, and the business owners say they cannot afford to hire another employee
Yeah.
because of the minimum wage. I mean, we've had, I would say, a good chunk, maybe almost half, maybe 40% of the owners that we spoke to, they themselves brought up the issue of minimum wage, and they
Hmm.
said, "Well, you know what? We can't fucking afford to pay these people." Because the minimum wage keeps going up, and each time it goes up, it's a huge strain on the small business, right? They're
Hmm.
already been hurt by all these lockdowns. They already been hurt by all of this, and the conservatives should be for small business. They should be
Yeah.
helping them recover. Yet they're saying, no, we're going to increase the minimum wage just to fuck up the small businesses even more.
See, that's the ridiculous thing is when you actually look at the context of the past 2 years where we have had all of these business closures and restrictions and like capacity limits, and then they've had to spend extra money on all of the PPE and like floor decals and signage and the plexiglass and all of this stuff. They've had extra expenses and they have not been able to be open, so they've lost income. And then they have actually increased minimum wage during the pandemic. They did. In the past 2 years, they've
Hmm.
increased minimum wage.
So
So
that hurt the businesses even more.
yeah, it did.
Yep.
And the government support that they're getting is not helping.
Yeah.
It did not make a difference.
And that's what we hear from the owners specifically.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you don't believe us, fucking go down and speak with the
Just
owners
go talk to an
themselves.
owner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Find
And
out what they've actually been experiencing. So increasing minimum wage yet again is not a good idea at the moment.
yes. And another thing about the minimum wage, and this is something that I've learned myself from other speakers talking about this, is they mentioned that it doesn't help the corporations either. I mean, of course, we're not trying to, encourage big business and all of this, but at the same time, what happens is, of course, minimum wage goes up. That's a huge strain on the corporations as well because the corporations have lots of employees. Now, you
Hmm.
increase the minimum wage, that's a lot of budget. Like that's a lot of money that's going to be potentially lost that particular month that it's going to go up. And so typically what happens with the corporation, and that depends on the corporation how they decide these things, but normally a corporation doesn't like losing money. And so they're going to cut back on the things that are least important. And what's
Hmm.
least important is having a blown out staff.
Yeah.
And mass layoffs are going to happen.
Hmm.
That's just a natural part of increasing the minimum wage. And so you increase the minimum wage, mass layoffs happen, you don't have a job. So would you rather have a job or you would have a job for, a dollar less of a pay? That's kind of the choice you would have to particularly make
Yeah.
on a stance of whether or not you're going to increase minimum wage because most people don't think of it that deeply. They would probably take a look at this and it's like, oh, great, you're going to increase minimum
Yeah.
wage. It's
Oh,
a good
yay, get
thing.
to make more
Yay.
money.
Right. But what are the implications of that? What are the
Hmm. You
consequences?
gotta look a little deeper and find it. But I have to say, unfortunately, and we're not gonna like this answer, but I feel like a lot of people would actually be okay with the situation that you just described because look at the like employment shortage that we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Like unemployment is actually at a low in terms of how the statistics are calculated, but all these businesses that we've been talking about, okay, honestly, just like walk around anywhere that there are businesses, you will see we are hiring signs like everywhere. And like, I mean, I think it's great that they're transparent about the fact that they're hiring. That's awesome. It's like, hey, I'm looking for a job. I know where to go to apply. That was not so easy a couple
Mhm.
years ago because it was like you'd walk in somewhere and they're not hiring.
Yeah.
They're
Or
fine.
they're
They're
not
fully
willing to
staffed.
train. It's like, yeah.
Exactly. That's another issue too. And then that costs more money as well. Like taking on another employee also costs the business a lot of money. Um, but everywhere is hiring right now. So I kind of don't think people have a problem with the jobs not being available if they aren't filling them right now when there are so many jobs available.
Absolutely. And just going back to the low voter turnout and the fact that the freedom movement was quite unsuccessful in their election because
Hmm.
I believe only 2.5% of the votes went to 2.7% of the votes went to New Blue Party, 1.8% of the votes went to Ontario Party.
Hmm.
So they split what 4 something percent between each other.
Yep.
So I mean, why were they so unsuccessful? How come only what is this 200,000 people came out to vote for these parties, and the majority of that is because of course they voted for the PCs to make sure that the Liberals or the NDP don't get into power. But my question was why, what's the deal with that? What's happening? And we've had and I spoke to some people who are involved in politics, and what's the major issues, and the issues were that the way that they conducted the campaigning
Hmm.
was just not good. They weren't very
Oh
successful. I
man.
mean, just doing the campaign of get out to vote is apparently, just like vote or campaigning 101. You encourage your voters to get out to vote. And that's
Hmm.
something that the Ontario Party and New Blue was not successful at. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of their campaign did not get out that message to their voters. And
A
so
lot of
you
people
wouldn't
did
be
not know when the
surprised.
election was. I'm like, I don't know how it's possible that you forget that the election is coming up. Like, there's signs everywhere. It's kind of hard to miss it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
But people don't know when it is. People don't even know where to vote. And there are ways that you can find out this information.
Yes. Um, but I mean, if you're very serious about winning an election and you're very serious and dedicated to actually, contributing and preventing new lockdowns and preventing all
Hmm.
these measures from happening, I don't understand why you wouldn't do this professionally and actually put an effort into the campaigning. Just doing simple things like get out to vote, doing simple things like going door to door. And I know some door to door campaigns happen. You've been
Hmm.
to one of them,
Yep.
but they did not reach the crowd. They did not reach the average person. Like I know that my parents in their home, nobody knocked on their doors. The Liberals came 3 times. The Liberals came 3 times. They had a heavy campaign going on in my riding, and they actually almost won, but PCs took it anyways. And in where I live, I had nobody came to visit,
Hmm.
and this is like Mississauga downtown riding. So it was just interesting to see if you're so dedicated and you really want to do this, you just haven't done enough of the work. And I
Hmm.
know it requires work, it requires money, but if you are serious about getting something done politically, then that requires work to do, and that wasn't completed. At the same time, another issue that we've seen is these so-called paper candidates. And paper
Hmm.
candidates are somebody that you put on a ballot just because to fill the ballot to make yourself seem like a legit party.
Yeah, like you have more members than you do, so you could
Yes.
actually form government. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that actually occurred with New Blue Ontario Party. I mean, my candidate in my riding was 21 years old, who just kind of says, never ran before, and these are my policies. It looked very generic, like they just kind of put it up on the website, made it up for
Yeah,
him.
it was. You showed me that it was like
Yeah.
literally like right off of the Ontario Party's platform.
Yeah, just copy and paste. Like
Yeah.
no effort put into this. So, I mean, this kid who is 21 years old who gets involved in this, I mean, he's just there on paper just to be put on there. He's not out there campaigning. He's not out there doing these events. He's not out there knocking on doors.
Yeah, I mean it should be a big decision to
Mhm.
decide to do this, and you need to take it seriously. And I mean, I get it. There's if there's like 8 people running in your riding, what are the chances of you getting in unless you are one of the big three? But this is why the way that we, actually take on voting needs to change.
Mhm.
But if you are going to put your name on the ballot, you should actually be putting in some effort. And, at the end of the day, you could end up actually having a job, a seat in parliament, and needing to represent these
Yeah.
people. Like, what happens if you are just a paper candidate and you get voted in? I mean, like, I don't know how, but it's possible.
Yep, and that's just what occurred. And they were not specifically focused on the writings that they were like, oh, that's a 21-year-old, we're not going to touch it. They just did not campaign that at all. They just had a paper candidate.
Hmm.
And that's what happened across the province. And they only, focused on these specific writings that they really wanted to campaign in and they thought they had a chance in. But you can just do that because and get somebody elected in there and get a voice in there. Like, imagine if we had an Ontario Party seat. They could actually express their voice and actually
Hmm.
get in the debate, despite not
Yeah.
having a huge influence.
Yeah.
That's a voice. That's
Yeah. You know what
something.
I actually found interesting was so Rick Nichols was an MPP for the
Hmm.
Conservative Party, and I forget if he resigned from that or was kicked out or what happened there.
He
But
was kicked out of
he was
Congress.
kicked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was technically part of the Ontario Party before the election happened. And so I was I checked out his writing, and he did not get reelected. The conservative in his writing actually did get voted in. So that's interesting because it shows that it kind of shows the mentality of the voters. It's like they are not doing what we're suggesting and voting for the best candidate. And this guy he was your representative before. Is this like you saying that you don't like him as a representative anymore? I don't think that's the case. I think it's just they blindly voted, I want conservative because that's who I voted for before, except now it's a different person. So, that was the one person that I thought actually had a good chance of getting in for the Ontario Party. I mean, like the candidate in my writing was actually quite active, so I thought she had a fair chance as well, but she didn't end up getting in. Um, yeah, but that seems to be the case is people are just voting for either the party they've always voted for or just the party and not even realizing that the person that you had in power before that you probably did vote for. If you're
Hmm.
voting conservative again, you probably voted conservative last
Yes.
time. So you didn't even realize the fact that, you have the same candidate there available again and you just didn't vote for him
it
because
just it
it's a
just
different
goes to
party
show it goes to show that people vote for the party and not for the
instead of the
candidate.
individual.
And we've had a podcast with Michael Snape, who is a political commentator, who came on the podcast to speak about politics and to actually make some projections about the election. And I asked him about the suggestions that he would make to voters, what you should do. And like you mentioned, we should vote locally because change always happens locally and then it
Hmm.
spreads out.
Hmm.
And so if you really want change in your life and you want change in your neighborhood and your community, you've got to know your candidates. You got to get to know them. That is part of participating and being a citizen.
Yes.
And people are just simply not doing that. And that's direct evidence of that because they did not vote for that same person. So clearly it wasn't the person they voted for earlier. They voted for their PC party.
Yep. They just wanted to keep that constant, that thing that they're comfortable with.
Yeah, and they're not getting to know their candidates. And that's how our elections go, but that's not how our
That's not how they
that's not how it
should.
works.
Yeah.
And so this is us, young, early 20-year-olds telling our viewers that, these are the things that we've learned. And this is only about like 2-3 days of research. This is
Yeah.
not difficult, guys. It's not rocket science. You don't have to do a
Yes.
degree in politics to know these
No, you
basic
don't. You
things.
shouldn't.
You
Don't do
try that. You
that.
shouldn't.
Uh,
But all it takes is a little bit of research, a little bit of participating in your own community, and that's what's going to get us out of the situation. If you really believe in the political solution, then you should have done that at the very least.
mhm,
Now, with that being said, we got to dismiss our students.
we do.
And so it was a great chat today.
It
Thank you for
was.
joining me.
Of course, of course. I hope everyone learned something.
Yes. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we will.